So we are on Parsha's Balak. That is page 857 in the art scroll. I'm going to start once again, page 857, Parsha's Balak. And it begins, and this is Bamidbar chapter 22, verse 2. It begins that Balak, son of Tzipor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorite. They had in Parsha's Chukas, in last week's Parsha, the end of last week's Parsha, they conquered Sichon and Og, two powerful warlords from the Amorite people. And Balak, son of Tzipor, saw that they had done. Moab became very frightened of the people because it was numerous, and Moab was disgusted in the face of the children of Israel. Moab said to the elders of Midian, "Now the congregation will look up our entire surroundings as an ox looks up the greenery of the field." Balak, son of Tzipor, was king of Moab at that time. So there's a lot to digest about this paragraph. One thing, just a few questions. First of all, that it says that it starts that Balak son of Tzipor, saw that what Israel had done to them, all right? Then it said Moab was afraid, and Moab said to the elders of Midian, "What should we do?" basically. And then it concludes that Balak, son of Tzipor, was king of Moab at that time. So why are we saying that Moab was concerned and Moab sent to the elders of Midian? Why wasn't it Balak, the king, who would send to the elders of Midian? And why are they sending to the elders of Midian? You would think they would send to the king of Midian. So, and another thing is that they weren't, it doesn't say that like they were afraid that the children of Israel would invade them. It says the congregation will look up our entire surroundings as an ox looks up the greenery of the field. What does that mean? So our sages say that Moab really did not have anything to fear from the Jewish people. We saw in last week's Parsha, in Parsha's Chukas, that when they came to the land of Moab, or was it Moab? Yeah, when they came to the land of Moab, they actually sent a message, "Can we go through?" And Moab said no, so they went around instead. And the reason for that was, let's see. Yeah, and the reason for that is that we were commanded in Devarim, we were commanded not to invade Moab, because the Moabites were descendants of Lot, and Lot did kindness to Abraham, where Abraham said that Sarah was his sister, where in reality she was his wife, and Lot was traveling with them and didn't reveal that. So we were commanded not to invade his children, which include the Moabites. So the Moabites really didn't have anything to fear from the Jewish people. What they were saying is that the congregation will look up our entire surroundings as an ox looks up the greenery of the field. They were saying they're not going to invade us, that we're not afraid of, but they're going to isolate us. They're going to conquer everyone around us, and we'll be completely isolated. And he's saying when an ox licks the greenery of the field, it's not so discriminating where it eats, and it might actually go a little bit into the part that it's not aiming for. And we're saying that they might be collateral damage to the Jews conquering everyone around them. So that was their fear. And why was it that Moab was sending to the elders of Midian? Why was it not Balak, the king of Moab, sending to the elders of Midian? So first of all, in regard to the elders of Midian, our sages say that they sent specifically to the elders of Midian because Moshe grew up in Midian, in a sense. Moshe lived a long time amongst the Midianites. Because Moshe fled, it says that when Moshe began to grow up, so he became an adult and he went out, and then he got in trouble with Paro and he fled. And Moshe was gone from Egypt. The Ramban says it would have had to have been 60 to 70 years that he was gone from Egypt, because he was 80. He was young. He had just grown up when he fled from Paro. And when he stood before Paro, when he returned to Egypt, he was 80 years old. So he would have been gone a minimum of 60 years. And where was he then? He was in Midian. And in fact, he married Yisro, who was a Kohen Midian, a priest of Midian. He married Yisro's daughter. So he was in Midian. So the Midianites would have known Moshe for a long time. And the Ramban says specifically that elders of Midian, the king of Midian wouldn't necessarily know Moshe, but the elders of Midian would remember him, and they'd be able to tell them how this leader of the Jewish people thinks and how they would be able to defeat them. And in fact, the elders of Midian advised them that Moshe's power, his strength is his mouth, that he prays and he's connected to he has spiritual strength. And so they said that the only way to fight against him is to employ Bilam, whose strength is also a strength of the mouth and a spiritual strength with the power to curse and to make bad things happen to others. And the Medrash says also that, or the Ramban comments that this, that it says, concludes Balak, son of Tzipor, was king of Moab at that time, that at that time is literally at that moment, was when he became king. And before they sent to the elders of Moab, Balak was not the king yet. And part of their advice was, in order to get this done, in order to defend yourself, to hire Bilam and to defeat the Jewish people, you need the unity and the directness of purpose that having a king would bring you. And that their appointing Balak was actually part of the advice that they got from the elders of Midian. So until they consulted with the elders of Midian, Balak was not the king. Okay, so now moving on. In verse 5, it states, he sent messengers to Bilam, son of Baar, to Pesor, which is by the river of the land of the members of his people, to summon him, saying, behold, the people has come out from Egypt. Behold, it has covered the surface of the earth that sits opposite me. So now please come and curse this people for me, for it is too powerful for me. Perhaps I'll be able to strike it and drive it away from the land. For I know that whomever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is accursed. So the commentaries ask, if that's the case, that whoever you bless is blessed and whomever you curse is accursed, why are they asking that the Jewish people should be cursed? Why don't they ask that they should be blessed? Meaning bless us that we'll be able to defeat them, rather than why are they taking the negative tact of cursing the Jewish people? They should have Bilam bless themselves, if in reality whoever he blesses is blessed. And to that, the commentaries answer that in fact, they knew that Bilam did not have the power to bless. That Bilam's power was, our sages say, was ayin hara. That means that he had an evil eye. He was able to see the worst in everybody and to see their spiritual vulnerabilities, where the spiritual weaknesses were, and attack there and curse them based on that. And he really didn't have the power of blessing, but the Moabites were saying this to Bilam to flatter him. And that we know whoever you bless is blessed, where in reality they know that was not true. Okay, so moving on, verse 7, the elders of Moab, the elders of Midian went with charms in their hands, like the equipment that he'd used, the magical equipment. They came to Bilam and spoke to him the words of Balak. He said to them, spend the night here and I shall give you a response as Hashem will speak to me. So the elders of Midian stayed there with Bilam. Okay, Moab stayed there with Bilam. Now on page 859, verse 9, Hashem came to Bilam and said, who are these men with you? Bilam said to Hashem, Balak, son of Tzipor, king of Moab, sent to me. Verse 11 on page 859, behold, the people coming from Egypt, whatever, they want me to curse them. And Hashem said to Bilam in verse 12, you shall not go with them, you shall not curse the people, for it is blessed. So Hashem said, Hashem, he had this prophecy. Hashem asked him, what are you doing? He said, I'm there, they want me to curse. And Hashem said, no, you can't do it. So in verse 13, Bilam arose in the morning and said to the officers of Balak, go to your land, for Hashem refuses to let me go with you. The officers of Moab arose and came to Balak and said, Bilam refused to go with us. And then Balak kept on sending officers more and higher ranking than these. Why did he feel that that would work? If Bilam was telling him that God said, I can't come with you, why is he sending higher ranking officers? So I say to say there's a mission in Pirkei Avos that uses Bilam as the example of the epitome of haughtiness, of arrogance. And when Bilam said that God said, I can't go with you, he understood that to mean that not that God doesn't want him to go on the mission, that God has such a high, he understood that God has such a high opinion of him, of Bilam, that it's not worthy of his dignity to go with these low-ranking officers. So Balak kept sending higher and higher ranking officers in order to convince him to come, because then in fact Bilam would feel maybe, and based on Bilam's understanding, he'd be able to come because of his great arrogance. Okay, and then it concludes in verse 16 that they came to Bilam and said to him, so said Balak, son of Tzipor, do not refrain from going to me, for I will honor you greatly, and everything you say to me I shall do, so go now and curse this people for me. And Bilam answered and said to the servants of Balak, if Balak will give me his household of silver and gold. I cannot transgress the word of Hashem, my God, to do anything great or small. And now you two stay here for the night. I will know more what Hashem will speak with me. And here you see Bilam, and it's really, in the whole Parsha, you see everything that Bilam said was very calculated, and there's always an inference that you could pick out of what he really means when he's talking. And in this case, where he says, if Balak will give me his household of silver or gold, I cannot transgress the word of Hashem, there was a hint there. I'm looking for a higher offer. How about you try offering that and we'll see what happens. So Bilam always had an angle with everything he said. Okay, and now in verse 20, the bottom of page 859, it says, Hashem came to Bilam at night and said to him, if the men come to summon you, arise and go with them, but only the thing that I speak to you, that shall you do. So we started off, Hashem said, no, don't go with them. Now Hashem is telling Bilam, if the men came to summon you, arise and go with them, but you can only speak what I say to you. So then in verse 21 at the bottom of page 859, Bilam arose early in the morning and saddled his she-donkey and went with the officers of Moab. So it says that he saddled his she-donkey, and our sages say that this is an example of a concept that hatred messes up the natural order of things. And there's the corollary of this is that love, the opposite really, is that love also messes up the natural order of things. And that is when Hashem commanded Abraham to bring his son Yitzchak as an offering. It says also that Avram saddled his donkey in the morning. And that's because in his great love of a mitzvah, of a commandment from Hashem, even though Avram had lots of servants and saddling a donkey wasn't something that normally the master of the household would do, Avram did it himself because of his great love for Hashem. Here, the opposite is true, where Bilam, his great hatred, even though Bilam had all these people offering all this money, all these important people, lots of servants around, he did it himself. He saddled his own donkey because his great hatred messed up the natural order of things. And so it says that he went with the officers of Moab. Then, on page 861, verse 22, it says Hashem's wrath flared because he was going, which the commentaries jump on. Hashem just told him he could go. Why is Hashem's wrath flaring? Because he's going. And the angel of Hashem stood him on the road. The donkey stopped. It saw the angel with the sword drawn, and it stopped, and he went around it. And this happened again, that the angel was going, and the angel stood in front of him, and there was a fence on one side, and his leg was crushed against the fence. Then, in verse 26, the angel of Hashem went further and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn right or left. The she-donkey saw the angel of Hashem and crouched beneath Bilam. Bilam's anger flared, and he struck the she-donkey with the staff. In verse 28, Hashem opened the mouth of the she-donkey and said to Bilam, what have I done to you that you struck me these 3 times? And Bilam said to the she-donkey, because you mocked me, if only there was a sword in my hand, I would now have killed you. The she-donkey said to Bilam, am I not your she-donkey that you have ridden all your life until this day? Have I been accustomed to do such a thing to you? He said no. And then on page 863, verse 31, then Hashem uncovered Bilam's eyes, and he saw the angel of Hashem standing on the road with his sword drawn in his hand. He bowed his head and prostrated himself on his face. And we'll get back to this whole conversation with the donkey. So now Bilam saw that the reason why this donkey was stopping is because this angel was standing with the sword. And the angel said, why are you striking your donkey? The she-donkey saw me, and if it didn't turn away, I would have killed you. And then in verse 34, Bilam said to the angel of Hashem, I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing opposite me on the road. And now if it is evil in your eyes, I shall return. And the angel of Hashem in verse 35 said to Bilam, go with the men, but only the word that I shall speak to you, that you shall speak. So Bilam went with the officers of Balak. So this whole conversation, all the commentaries have struggled with, is that originally Hashem told Bilam not to go. Then he said, if the men summon you, go. Then he went, and then, and he went with them. And then once he went with them, Hashem, it says that Hashem got angry at him and sent an angel to stop him. Then once he saw the angel and the angel stopped him, the angel told him, you can go. So what's going on here? So Shimon Schwab answers that really with another question. He answers with another question, which is, how is it, why is there such concern over Bilam going to curse the Jewish people, let him curse the Jewish people. Hashem doesn't have to listen to Bilam. So why is there such a concern in stopping Bilam from cursing the Jewish people? And they answer that, I think the Meshech Chochmah answers that Hashem's intention was that when we enter into a dangerous situation, when we're in danger, that brings up that brings up din in the world. What it gives the Satan, the Satan, an opportunity to prosecute us. It brings up a question: do these people deserve to survive? Meaning, whereas when we're going through our life, there are certain times that we're judged, like Rosh Hashanah, and perhaps there are other things that arouse judgment. But if a person enters into a dangerous situation, if they're in danger, then there's a question before the heavenly tribunal: does this person deserve to survive? And Bilam was in fact a danger. And there are other dangers as well. For example, the people were about to invade the land of Canaan. There's going to be a war. There was a war coming. So Hashem wanted to destroy the morale of the people of Canaan in order that they wouldn't really fight. And how did he destroy the morale? That he sent the biggest tough guy that the non-Jews had. He sent their greatest spiritual, their greatest sorcerer, their greatest spiritual power, Bilam, who was in fact a prophet of Hashem, which we'll discuss how Bilam was a prophet, but he was in fact a prophet, and he had this power to curse that whoever he cursed, bad things would happen to them. And our sages say that he knew there's one moment in the day that Hashem's anger flares against the world, and Bilam knew how to get that exact moment in order to curse people and to make bad things happen to people. So he was their greatest weapon. And when they saw that even Bilam would speak positively about the Jewish people, and Bilam would in fact go try to curse them and couldn't even do it and end up blessing them, so that would destroy their morale. That their greatest weapon not only did it fail to destroy the Jews, he blessed the Jews, so that would destroy their morale. And where am I going with this? Oh yeah. But Hashem, okay. So anyway, and they say also that's why this donkey is talking, which is another question that they ask on this topic, which is, why did the donkey have to talk? That seems like it's completely unnecessary. It's almost like the comic relief you find in movies, that you have a talking donkey just like for comic relief. But what does it do to the plot? What does it do to the story? Why is there a talking donkey? How does that change Hashem's plan for this whole thing? This whole thing could have happened without the talking donkey. And to that, the Meshech Chochmah answers that if Bilam would have just gone and blessed the Jewish people, so people might talk and say, maybe the Jews just paid him off. Maybe Moab was paying this much and the Jews just paid him double. And that's why he blessed them. So they had to see that there's this great miraculous event take place that had no natural explanation. So they'll see that this is all divine providence, and it's all that Bilam has no powers when he's up against Hashem. That's why this whole thing happened. Okay, but back to the original question, that why did Hashem first tell him to stop, then to go, then to stop, then to go? And to that, Reb Shimon Schwab answers that there's a concept that the way a person wants to go, that's where they're carried. That if a person wants, really, truly, deeply desires something, Hashem, they're led in that direction. And Bilam really, really, really wanted to curse the Jewish people. He was very excited about it, like we'll see. So, and that once again would arouse a danger to the Jewish people, that just the fact that Bilam's out there trying to do it and deeply desires it, he'd be carried in that direction. And that brings the Jewish people in danger, which once again brings din. It brings a judgment before the heavenly tribunal. Do they deserve to be saved? So that's why when Hashem originally told him, don't go, but when Hashem said to go, he said specifically, in verse 20, it says, Hashem came to Bilam at night and sent him. If the men came to summon you, this is 8:59, verse 20, arise and go with them. Only if the people come to summon you. What does that mean? So I say that means if they pay you. Meaning if you're going for the money, then you could do that. And what's the reason? Because if he's doing it for the money, that means that he doesn't really care if he's doing it not what we call the shema, for its own sake. for the sake, if he's not going to curse the Jewish people, he's just going for the money. So then there's no deep desire to bring about the results, and we're not in that kind of danger. But if he's doing it for its own sake and he's going because he wants to do it, so that puts us in danger. But he points out that in this entire incident with the angel of Hashem and the talking donkey, it never mentions the people of Moab there. It just says in that entire incident, it doesn't mention anything about the princes of Moab until all the way at the end, where it says, in verse 35 on page 863, it says, the angel of Hashem said to Bilam, go with the men, but only the word that I shall speak to you, that shall you speak. That shall you speak. That's the first time we see the people of Moab again, that go with the men, go with those people of Moab. And he says, why are they not mentioned earlier in this incident? Because they weren't there. And what happened was that Bilam saddled his donkey and he ran ahead of them. He was so excited to go on this mission to curse the Jews that he went out ahead of everyone else and left his whole honor guard behind. And that just showed that he wasn't interested in the glory and the honor of all this big kingly escort. He just wanted to do the act. He wanted to curse the Jews. So he demonstrated that he wasn't following what Hashem said, which was, don't do it for its own sake, do it for the money. And therefore, the angel stopped him, and the angel of Hashem, verse 35, what did he say? Go with the men, but only the word that I shall speak to you, that shall you speak. So he said, go with the men, meaning don't do it for your own sake, for its own sake, do it for the honor. Go with the men, go with this whole retinue. Okay, and now back to this whole conversation with the donkey. One thing I have to say for Alan is that it says with the donkey that when he was beating the donkey, it says, Bilam said to the she-donkey in verse 29 on page 861, because you mocked me, if only there was a sword in my hand, I would have killed you. The she-donkey said to Bilam, am I not your she-donkey that you have ridden all your life until this day? Have I been accustomed to do such a thing for you? He said no. So there's a medrash that says that part of the protest of the she-donkey was, there's big stress kind of here that this is a she-donkey, a she-donkey, a she-donkey, is that this donkey was saying that you rode me all the, you rode, what's the expression they use? You have ridden all your life until this day, have I been accustomed to do something to you, such a thing to you. The medrash says that this donkey was Bilam's lover. And so it was saying that this is completely inappropriate for you to be beating me. Okay, leave that at that. Okay, so it continues on page 863, verse 36. Moving on, Balak heard that Bilam had come, so he went out towards him to the city of Moab, which is on the border of Arnon, which is at the edge of the border. Balak said to Bilam, did I not urgently send you to summon you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not capable of honoring you? Why did you put me through so much to get you here? And Bilam said to Balak, behold, now I have come to you. Am I empowered to say anything? Whatever word Hashem puts into my mouth, that I shall speak. So Bilam warned Balak in advance that I can't say what I want to say. All I could say is what Hashem, whatever Hashem tells me to say, that's what I could say. So in verse 39, on page 863, Bilam went with Balak and they came to Kiryas Futzas. Balak slaughtered cattle and sheep and sent to Bilam the officer that were with him. Okay, and then Balak took Bilam and brought him to the heights of Baal, and from there he saw the edge of the people. So Bilam first of all brought him to the heights of Baal, Baal being this pagan deity, and where he saw the edge of the people, and Balak was hoping that the presence of this idol and being able to see the Jewish people would arouse such a hatred in Bilam's heart that he'd give a good curse. And on page 865, chapter 23, Bilam said to Balak, build for me here 7 altars and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams. So why the 7 altars and 7 bulls and 7 rams? And what's with the 7 altars? So our sages say that the Medrash says that there were 7, that we have 7 instances where our forefathers built altars, where our righteous forefathers built altars and brought an offering. They are Adam, let's see if I could get it. Adam, Hevel, Abel, who was Adam's son, and Noah, and Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Moshe. So that's 7 of our forefathers that we find that they built altars. So Bilam was trying to accomplish, he was saying, build 7 altars for me, and our 7 offerings will overcome the merit of those 7 altars that our forefathers built. And our sages say that the Gemara says that a person should always do a mitzvah, even if they're doing the mitzvah without the best of intentions. Because if they do a mitzvah without the best of intentions, without the intention specifically for the mitzvah, it'll bring them to do the mitzvah with proper intentions. And they say that we find that Balak was rewarded for bringing building these altars and bringing these offerings, even though his purpose, his intention was to curse the Jewish people. Still, he was rewarded by from him descended Rus, who's the grandmother of David HaMelech, of King David. The great grandmother, of King David. So, and the Maharal explains this concept. Why was it? Meaning, he had all the worst intentions. Why was he rewarded? So he says that even though his intentions in building these altars and bringing these offerings were to bring curses to the Jewish people, in fact, it did the opposite. Meaning, he brought it to allow himself to give a good curse. But in fact, he didn't curse the Jewish people. He blessed the Jewish people. And these offerings allowed him to give a better blessing to the Jewish people. So since, in fact, good came out of these offerings that he brought, so he was rewarded, and the reward was a spiritual reward, that his descendant Rus joined the Jewish people and became the great grandmother of David and Mashiach. Okay, so now in verse 5, Hashem put an utterance in Bilam's mouth and said, "Go back to Balak, and thus shall you say." So now Bilam has this prophecy. And in verse 6, he returned to him, and behold, he was standing by his burnt offering, he and all the officers of Moab. He declaimed his parable and said, and I'm not going to go through all of these prophecies, but he did say, "From Aram, Balak, king of Moab, led me from the mountains of the east. Come curse Yaakov for me, come bring anger upon Israel. How can I curse? God has not cursed. How can I anger? God is not angry." And Rashi explains this: how can I curse? God is not cursed. How can I bring anger? God is not angry. Referring to that there were times in our history where it would really have been appropriate or expected for our ancestors to have been cursed, for our forefathers to have been cursed, but they were not. One example is with Shimon and Levi, of the 2 of the tribes, when they killed out the entire city of Shechem. And Yaakov, when he blessed the tribes, what he said to Shimon and Levi is, "Ar apam kiaz," that cursed is their anger. Then instead of cursing them, he cursed their anger. But on they themselves, the curse did not fall. And also when Yaakov disguised himself as Esav to steal the blessings that Yitzchak intended to give to Esav, and instead he gave it to Yaakov, Yaakov said to his mother that father Yitzchak might feel me and realize I'm not Esav, and he'll curse me. And Rivka told him that any curse he gives will fall onto her. But in fact, when Yaakov discovered that when Yitzchak discovered that Yaakov had disguised himself as Esav and stolen the blessings, instead of cursing him, what he said is, he will be blessed, Baruch Yeh, that he'll be blessed. So even though a curse may have been appropriate there, but instead he was blessed. And in these cases, we see that the Jewish people were not cursed by Hashem. So Balaam was saying, how can I curse them now? Okay, and in verse 9, from its origins I see rock-like, and from hills do I see it. Behold, is a nation that will dwell in solitude, not be reckoned among the nations. Who has counted the dust of Yaakov, or numbered a quarter of Israel? May my soul die the death of the upright. May my end be like this. So our sages say that from its origins I see rock-like, and hills do I see it. It's that Bilam, I mentioned that you could, from everything he sees, you could understand where he was going. And from his blessings, you could see the curses that he intended, because he just blessed. The blessing is the opposite of the curse. And here he's going at our roots. He's going where he's cursing. He's, instead of cursing each individual Jew, he's trying to curse the beginning of the roots of the Jews, and that is our forefathers and our patriarchs and matriarchs. And that's this, from its origins, I see it rock-like, the rocks referring to our patriarchs that are referred to as rocks at times. And from the hills, I see it, the hills are referring to our matriarchs. and saying they dwell in solitude, will not be reckoned among the nations, that we live apart from the nations and are not counted among the nations when they're punished. And in verse 10, who has counted the dust of Yaakov or numbered a quarter of Israel? And on who has counted the dust of Yaakov, our sages say that this means that who could count the mitzvahs that Yaakov does, specifically the mitzvahs that they do with the dirt. That even the dirt we do many mitzvahs with, like there are many regulations on how we're able to plow, how we're able to plant, how we're able to harvest, and there's just so many mitzvahs that we do with each, just as part of our daily life and part of our economic life. There's so many mitzvahs. Who could count them, and how could I curse these people? But then he said, on top of page 867, may my soul die the death of the upright, and may my end be like his. Where did that come from? So our sages say that he, in fact, that he heard himself, meaning he intended to curse the Jews, but when he heard himself blessing the Jews, he wanted to die. He was like, I'd rather die than do this, than bless the Jews. But because he had this great spiritual ecstasy of this prophecy, so that brought him to at least request the death of the upright, meaning that he saw that the righteous amongst the Jews will be, or the Jews will merit to be brought back from the dead and have a portion in the world to come. And he said, that's how I want it. That's what I want. I want my end be like his. I want the world to come like the righteous. And now, and of course, in verse 11, Balak was angry at him, and he spoke up and says, I'm sorry, what have you done to me to curse my enemy as I brought you? But behold, you blessed them. And Bilam responded, I told you, whatever Hashem puts in my mouth, I have to speak. So now they go to a different place. And in verse 16, it says, Hashem happened upon Bilam, put an utterance in his mouth, and he said, go back to Balak, and so shall you say. And just as an aside, the word it uses here is Hashem happened upon Bilam. I believe it used the same word before. Oh, no. I'm sorry. So here it says that Hashem happened upon Bilam. The Hebrew for that is vayikar. You notice that's very similar to vayikra, and he called, that it says when Hashem spoke to Moshe, it says Hashem called to Moshe. But there's a big difference that calling to someone is showing a sense of love to them. Whereas vayikar, and he happened upon him, makes it sound like he wasn't going to talk to him, but like he happened to be there. It was like he encountered him, but it wasn't a planned like calling out to him, to show the difference between how he speaks to his beloved and how he speaks to this Bilam. Okay, so the second prophecy was, in verse 19, God is not man that he should be deceitful, nor son is man that he should relent. Basically, he told the Jewish people he's going to give them the land. He's not going to retract from that. And behold, to bless I have received, he is blessed, and I shall not contradict it. And here our sages also say that you see the struggle that Bilam's having. He's trying his best to resist and not bless the Jewish people, and he's arguing with himself here. But he says, behold, to bless I have received, he is blessed, I shall not contradict it. He's trying to contradict him, but he's saying, I can't. I want to do it, but I can't. He said to bless, I can't contradict that. Then in verse 21, it says, he perceived no iniquity in Yaakov, saw no perversity in Israel. Hashem his God is with him, and the friendship of the king is in it. And the commentaries ask here that, what does that mean? This seems to be saying that the Jewish people have never sinned, that he perceived no iniquity in Yaakov, saw no perversity in Israel. That means that Hashem did not see any sin in the Jewish people. Obviously, the Jewish people sinned many times in the desert. How can we say that he didn't see sin in Yaakov and in Israel? So I heard from my Rosh Yeshiva, or Steinman, that what it's saying here is that there's really two kinds of sins. That there's a sin that a person does, and that means that a person is caught by the Yetzer Hara, their evil inclination convinces them to sin. It convinces them to do an action that is a sin. Shouldn't have done that, they did it. That's something that they did. But there are some sins that become a part of a person and makes the person a sinner. And that's when a person internalizes, when the person sins and internalizes it and allows that to become a part of them and become who they are, that becomes a part of their identity. Then that sin isn't something that the person's doing. That sin is who the person is. That's who they are. That becomes a part of their identity. that the sin corrupts them to the point that they are the sin, they are a sinner. And that's what Bilam is saying here, that Hashem looked at the children of Israel and saw that there was no sin in them, that they were not sinners. They had done actions that were sins, but those actions were, like it says about Hashem talking to Bilam, Vayikra, that it happened, that they sinned because they got convinced, but they stumbled, and everybody stumbles. We're human beings and we stumble. We don't always do the right thing. But they did not allow it to become part of who they are. They didn't allow it to corrupt themselves and to become sinners. And that's what Bilam's saying, that I can't curse them, because Hashem looks at them and sees that there's no sinners amongst them. There are people who have sinned, but there are no sinners. And in verse 22, it is God who brought them out of Egypt according to his power, his loftiness. And in verse 23 on page 869, for there is no divination in Yaakov, no sorcery in Israel. He's saying that none of his sorcery could work against the Jewish people. Even now it is said to Yaakov and Israel what God has wrought. And in verse 24, behold, the people will arise like a lion cub and raise itself like a lion. It will not lie down until it consumes prey and drinks the blood of the slain. So in this verse, our sages say that he was hinting that when a Jew arrives, what does a Jew do when he wakes up? When a Jew wakes up, he wakes up like a lion. That's the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law says a Jew should, we should wake up like a lion to serve Hashem. And we should wake up with strength. And the people arise like a lion come and raise it like a lion. The first thing we do, we wake up early and we go to shul and we put on our talis, we put on tefillin. The first thing we do in the morning, we wake up, we go to shul and we start doing mitzvahs. We put on our talis, we put on our tefillin, we say Shema, we daven to Hashem. So we're waking up with strength and doing mitzvahs. And then it will not lie down until it consumes prey and drinks the blood of the slain. That means that we don't go to sleep until we say Shema in bed before we go to sleep. And that saying of Shema is the equivalent of eating the prey around us. That's eating anything dangerous around us so it can't harm us. That when we say Shema, that gives us protection from any harm at night. Okay, then in verse 25, Balak said to Bilam, neither shall you curse them at all, nor shall you bless them at all. Bilam answered and said to Balak, have I not spoken to you, saying, whatever Hashem shall speak, I shall do? And then he took him to a different place. So now he's giving him another blessing. And so in verse 1, it states, chapter 24, verse 1 on page 869, Bilam saw that it was good in Hashem's eyes to bless Israel, so he did not go as every other time towards divinations. He stopped using the magic. He set his face towards the wilderness. Bilam raised his eyes, saw Israel dwelling according to his tribes, and the Spirit of God was upon him. He declaimed his parable and said, the words of Bilam, son of Ba'ar, the word of the man with open eye, that he could see well, he could see the future, he could see the moment of Hashem's anger. The word of one who hears the sayings of God, who sees the vision of Shakai while fallen with uncovered eyes. How goodly are your tents, O Yaakov, your dwelling places, O Israel. What's the meaning of this? Or I say to say that he saw the, as it says, that he saw Israel dwelling according to its tribes, and here he's praising their tents. So I say to say that he saw that the way their tents were set up, that they were set up that one person's window was not opposite someone else's window, and one person's opening to the tent, their doorway, was not opposite someone else's doorway, meaning that they set up their tents in their encampment in a way that offered each other privacy. And that was something that he found worthy of praise. And in fact, that's something that our sages really praise, is that we offer people privacy, to the point that if two people own adjoining properties and they have yards that are adjoining, they could go to court, and one person could go to court and force the other person to build a fence and to build a wall between them, because there's a concept of hezek, of damage, of seeing. Just the fact that someone could see in your yard is considered damage, and you could go to court and force them to split the cost of that wall because a person is entitled to some amount of privacy. And I say to say that even when a person, according to halacha, even when a person comes home into their own house, they should knock before they walk in, because people are entitled to privacy. They should know that someone's coming before being barged in it. And this is something that's really amazing, because it's very different from that. Observant Judaism in a way could be seen as cultish, meaning that we have a very strong sense of community and we do everything together. We isolate ourselves to a certain extent. But this is something that cults, that's something that is usually the first thing to go, is any sense of privacy, because they want every wrongdoing or any perceived wrongdoing to be witnessed, so they could discipline them and stop people from having any kind of doubts or any kind of rebellion. But by us, it's the opposite. Privacy is something that's really valued, and something here that's praised by Bilam and through a prophecy from Hashem. Additionally, I say to say that this blessing of how goodly are your tents, O Yaakov, your dwelling places, O Israel, is referring to our synagogues and our study halls. And that's something that we had even in our long exile. We haven't had the Beis Hamikdash, we haven't had the temple, we haven't had a tabernacle. But what we do have, we have our holy places still. We still have our shul, we have our study hall, our Beis Medrash, our study hall. And that's something that everywhere we go, we try to establish, and it really keeps our keeps us alive, keeps us alive as a nation. Okay, so moving on. So he blessed them again. In verse 10, Balak's anger flared against Bilam, and he clapped his hands. Balak said to Bilam, to curse my enemies did I summon you, and behold, you have continually blessed them these 3 times. Now flee to your palace. I said I would honor you, but behold, Hashem has withheld you from honor. And Bilam said to Balak, did I not speak to your emissaries who have sent to you, who you have sent to me, saying, if Balak were to give me his house full of silver or gold, I could not transgress the word of Hashem to do good or bad on my own. Whatever Hashem speaks, that I shall speak. So I saw the Beis Yitzchak asks, and he actually quotes the Beis Halevi, who apparently he quotes him as his Rabbi. I didn't know that was his Rabbi, but he quotes the Beis Halevi asking, why is Balak so angry? Bilam has told him over and over again that he can't curse if Hashem doesn't allow him, and whatever Hashem tells him to do, he'll do. So how is it? Why is Balak so angry now after hearing this over and over? And what's Bilam's response? That I told you, if you give me silver or gold? He said that already lots of times. So the Beis Halevi answered is that I can't, like if someone says I can't do that, that can mean 2 different things. And he gives a mashal. He says, imagine a person tells somebody that I'll give you $100 if you smack that if you smack that person across the face. Just walk over to that guy and smack him across the face. And the guy says, I can't do that. It's a very important person, or maybe a rabbi. I can't do that. And then someone else says, I'll give you, and he goes over to someone else and says, I'll give you $100 if you pick up this car. And that person says, I can't do that. So I can't do that means 2 completely different things. The first, I can't do that, doesn't mean he physically can't do it. It's actually very easy to walk over to someone and slap them across the face. If they're not expecting it, it's very easy. What I can't do that means is that based on my upbringing and my values and societal values, it's not something I could bring myself to do. I can't do that in that case means I won't do it because of my values. Whereas picking up a car, picking up a house, that's something that you can't physically do. And what's the difference between the 2? The difference is the amount of money you're offered. That if you're offered $100, you might say, I can't do it. If he offers the guy $1 million, give you $1 million to slap that person across the face, he might actually go and do it. And that I can't becomes maybe I can. Especially if he's smart. This Beis Halevi actually speaks out. If he's smart, he'll go over to that other guy and tell him, here, I'll give you a few $1,000s if you let me do this. And they'll both come out ahead. So I can't, in those cases, when it's a matter of values, could be very quickly become, maybe I can. Whereas if it's a question of physical ability, he says, can you, I'll give you $1 million if you pick up this house. There's nothing that you could do. You could give him $1 billion. He can't physically do it. So Balak, when Bilam said, I can't curse them, and I could only say what Hashem allows me to say, he understood him as saying that first case. He thought I can't do it means that my values don't allow me to. So he kept on giving more and more incentives and thinking that eventually maybe that I can't will become, hey, maybe I can. Whereas Bilam's response What does that know? It's the second case. I can't physically do it. Hashem is controlling what I say, and I can't say anything other than what Hashem wants me to say. And that's why his response was in verse 13. On page 871, if Balak were to give me a house full of silver or gold, I cannot transgress the word of Hashem to do good or bad. No amount of money, no amount of incentive is going to allow me to do it because it's not something I could physically do. Hashem is not allowing me, not giving me the ability to do it. Okay. Then, on page 873, verse 14, it states, and now behold, I go to my people, come, I shall advise you what this people will do to your people in the end of days. He's saying, I'll leave you with something, I'll tell you what they're going to do, what the Jewish people are going to do to you at the end of days. The word of Balaam, son of Baar, the word of a man with an open eye. In verse 16, the word of one who sees the hearings of Hashem and knows the knowledge of the Supreme One, who sees the visions of Shakai while fallen with uncovered eyes. I shall see him, but not now. I shall look at him, but it is not near. A star is issued from Yaakov, a scepter bearer has risen from Israel. He shall pierce the nobles of Moab and undermine the children of Shes. Edom shall be a conquest, and Seir shall be a conquest of his enemies, and Israel will obtain success. And our sages say that I shall see him, but not now, is referring to David HaMelech, King David, who will be born in about 400 years. From this point in time, David will be, so he's saying, I see him, but not now. And then I shall look at him, but it is not near. That's referring to the Mashiach, who's a descendant of David HaMelech, King David, who we hope for every day. But it is not near. And a star is issued from Yaakov, that was referring to King David. A scepter bearer is risen from Israel, referring to Mashiach, and it goes back and forth between David and Mashiach and what they'll do. And one from Yaakov shall rule and destroy the remnant of the city. And then in verse 20, saw Amalek and declaimed his parable and said, Amalek is the first among the nations, but its end will be eternal destruction. And then in verse 21, he saw the Canaanite and declaimed his parable and said, strong is your dwelling and set on a rock is your nest. For if the Canaanite shall be laid waste, so where can Assyria take you captive? Who is this Canaanite? I say this Canaanite as in fact Yisro, who's called a Cani. And strong is your dwelling, set in the rock is your nest. That's telling us how Yisro joined the Jewish people. He joined the Jewish people and had a strong dwelling amongst them. And then for if the Canaanite shall be laid waste, till where can Assyria take you captive? Meaning, even if Assyria later would exile the 10 tribes, those are the 10 lost tribes, because Assyria had conquered a vast amount of territory, and he exiled all the peoples to different territories to get rid of any nationalistic ideas that nobody lived in their own land. And he said, even if Assyria takes the Canaanite, takes the descendants of Israel captive, they'll be returned. And then he declaimed his parable and said, who will survive when he imposes these? That he saw the destruction that the Assyrians will cause, and said, who can survive that? And big ships from the coast of Kithim will afflict Assyria and afflict the other bank, but it too will be forever be destroyed. Then he went on his way. Okay, so that's the end of the Bilam trying to curse the Jewish people. But he caused a lot more damage than that. And that is the end of the Parsha, chapter 25, on page 75. It states, Israel settled in the Shittim, and the people began to commit harlotry with the daughters of Moab. They invited the people to feasts of their gods. The people ate and prostrated themselves to their gods. Israel became attached to Baal Peor, and the wrath of Hashem flamed against Israel. And Hashem said to Moshe, take all the leaders of the people, hang them before Hashem against the sun, and the flaring wrath of Hashem will withdraw from Israel. Okay. And Moshe said to the judges of Israel, let each man kill his men who are attached to Baal Peor, the people who worship this pagan deity. And behold, the man of Israel came and brought a Midianite woman near to the brothers inside of Moshe and inside of the entire assembly of the children of Israel. And they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So what happened here? So we'll see in next week's Parsha, this man is Zimri. He was one of the leaders of the tribe of Shimon. And the people of Shimon, of his tribe, came to him and said, our people are dying, because many of them had been caught in this trap and had been seduced by these Midianite women and had worshipped Baal Peor. And he said, like, for the honor of our tribe, they're being killed. You have to do something. And Zimri took this Midianite princess in public in front of Moshe and said, is this woman permitted to me? And Moshe said, no. So he said, well, if that's the case, how are you married to Midianite? Because Moshe was married to Zipporah, who was a daughter of Yisro, who was a Midianite. So obviously it's very different. First of all, she had joined the Jewish people, and second of all, that was before the Torah was given. They got married before the Torah was given in any case. But But this is what he did, and he took her publicly into his tent to have his way with her. And in verse 7, Pinchas, son of Elazar, son of Aaron, the Kohen's son, he stood up from amidst the assembly and took a spear in his hand. He followed the Israelite men into the tent and pierced them both, the Israelite man and the woman in her stomach, and the plague was halted from the children of Israel. Those who died in the plague were 24,000. The 24,000 had died in a plague, and part of the punishment for this worship. So what was this Baal Pa'ar? So our sages say that the way the worship went, and the reason why the children of Israel, they got them so easily, was because the way that it was worshipped is that the people would relieve themselves in front of the idol. And that's how they were worshipped. There's a story that someone heard this and they were disgusted by that, and they defecated in front of the idol and threw their waste onto the idol. And the people got all excited about it. They said that this is the best someone's ever worshipped it. And they made him a high priest. And that's why the Jewish people were caught, is because they were doing it. When they heard the way that this was worshipped, they felt that they could do it in a mocking way. And they could mock the idol by relieving themselves in front of it. And they felt that would be mocking. But because that was the way that this was worshipped, so this was real idolatry. But why is that the case? What's the meaning behind this deity? How could it be that people would actually do that? They would relieve themselves in front of their deity. That's the worship. So commentaries say, I think Rabbi Chaim Shmulevitz said, that the whole idea behind this deity was not our idea of worship, which is that there's a higher power, that we subjugate ourselves before it. The idea of Baal Pa'or was the exact opposite. The idea of Baal Pa'or is that nothing matters, that there's no such thing as morality, there's no such thing as decency, there's no such thing as being civilized and being a mensch, and there's no such thing as being disciplined. And all these things have no value in their minds. And the worship of Baal Pa'or was, we'll relieve ourselves in public in front of our deity to show that we're animals. We're just animals, and we're just another species of animal without any. Animals relieve themselves in public without any embarrassment, and that's what we are. We're just another animal, and there's no reason for any moral thinking or any acting like a mensch, because we're just animals, and there's no decency necessary. And by the Jewish people, in their mocking way, they were doing this, but at the same time, they were expressing that idea that they were publicly relieving themselves in front of the deity. They were expressing that idea that their dignity didn't really matter to them, and the human dignity wasn't such an issue. So that itself was idolatry. Okay, and the Haftarah is on page 1189. Just very quickly, I just wanted to mention one thing about the Haftarah. And it's once again on page 1189 in the Art Scroll, and it's about. It's from the prophet Micha, and it talks about the things that Hashem did for us when we were in the desert, and it mentions this incident of Bilam. And in chapter 6, verse 5 in the Haftarah, it says, "Oh, my people, remember now what Balak, king of Moab, plotted, and what Bilam, son of Beor, answered him. Despite the sin of the spies dispatched from the Shittim, I nevertheless split the Jordan for you when I brought you to the Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of God." And what was this plan, this advice, what the Balak, king of Moab, plotted, what Bilam, son of Beor, answered him? What's his answer? That this whole incident with the with the Moabite women Midianite women seducing the Jewish people to worship this idol Baal Pa'or, that was all a result of advice that Bilam gave Balak. That when Bilam left, he told Balak, "I can't curse. God doesn't allow me to." But he had an idea. He told him, "Get them to sin, and then you might be able to beat them." And that was his advice, was seduce them with your women and get them to worship idols. And that's in fact what happened. And we lost many people from the Jewish people as a result of that.